Hello, listeners. This is Arthur. Today's episode is about Idaho. Here are some facts about Idaho. Capital and largest city is Boise. The population is 1.7 million 39th. The median income is $51,000. 36th. Idaho is the 14th biggest state.
Hello, everyone. This is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, and I'm here as usual with my co-host, Sophie. Hey, Sophie.
Hey, Kelly.
And today's episode is about the politics of Idaho, which I'm really excited about. I like learning about states that I know virtually nothing about. So to help us learn more about the politics of Idaho, we have with us today Teuvo and Alex, who have their own podcast about Idaho. So, hi, guys.
Hello. How's it going? Yeah, we're here in Idaho. We have a podcast called The Real CBA. We saw a need in the community because no one was talking about politics here, and we decided to branch off and do our own thing and actually start some kind of media since there's nothing going on here.
So CDA is the town that you're in, right? Coeur d'Alene. I may be saying that wrong. Coeur d'Alene. And it's way up in northern Idaho.
The Panhandle is what they call it, actually. Yeah, it's like the very northern part. We're about an hour and a half from the Canadian border, but we're growing like crazy, partially because we're only about 20 minutes away from Spokane, Washington, which is Washington's second largest city. We're kind of in this little metro area here that's all growing quickly. Even though Coeur d'Alene is a small town, we're like 50,000 population. We have a lot of surrounding cities, like maybe you've heard of Sandpoint, and then like Post Falls and Spokane in the valley. And so all these little cities together give us a population in the northwest, or inland northwest, what we call it, of, roughly like 350,000 or something like that. So
wow. All right. So I can't remember where I first heard about your podcast, but I will admit that you guys are the reason that we're doing the Politics of Idaho this week, because I said, there's a progressive politics podcast in Idaho. This is amazing.
We're very much so on the front lines over here in Coeur d'Alene and Idaho. Like, we have Seattle, which is super progressive. Then we have Spokane a little bit to the east. And then we have us. And we're just like fighting every day, trying to bring a progressive voice to Idaho and trying to change things over here because it's so heavily Republican, so at least in the legislature.
Yeah, so I was looking through, and the governor, the lieutenant governor, the secretary of state, both congressional representatives, both senators, and supermajorities in both the state house and the state senate are all Republican.
You got it.
Yep, because most of Idaho is rural, basically.
It's a state that spans two states, north to south, and so it takes 9 hours to go from north border to south border. It's a big state, and there are a lot of dirt roads, very rural, it's very spread out, but there are some like more hubs, like Coeur d'Alene and Boise, of course, but most of Idaho, I would say, is rural.
Moscow.
Right, the university town.
Yeah, that's Paulette's district, so Paulette Jordan, who's running for governor, who was our last show on our podcast, actually. She's in the Moscow district, so. Yeah, it's rough out here for us progressively minded people, and after the election, when we all kind of freaked out and said, hey, it's no longer acceptable to just be on the sidelines, it's time to jump in, we got to save this country. And, when we got, like me, getting involved with the local Democratic Party, that was a frustrating process because there's this old guard who had been so beaten down by this supermajority we just spoke about for so many years and losing so much that they were just on their last straw. And, no young people were involved. There was no money, and their media infrastructure was in shambles. And
you basically had little old grannies running the website and stuff. It's hilarious.
Yeah, pretty bad. So we jumped in and worked through all of this collective frustration to get some stuff done, and got a new logo for the local Dems and redid their website. And in that process, and meeting all these people and creating a community, in the political realm here, we just kept getting more and more people involved And then Alex came along, and we kept having these amazing conversations on my porch, like in the summer. And I just was like, we need to bring this conversation to everyone in North Idaho. We need to talk about these things out loud. And I just one day was like, all right, and I'm going to start a podcast. And I do media for a living, and so does Alex. And so I had already had a blog going called the Real CBA for a while, where I just was basically like posting opinion pieces, about local stuff or restaurants or whatever I felt. And I'm a photographer too, so it was kind of a photojournalism thing. I'd go take pictures. I just decided that, the next step to that was to do a podcast. And we just, me and Alex just kind of were at the right place, the right time meeting. And he had an office down at this new building called Innovation Den in Coeur d'Alene. And I bought some gear and he bought some gear, and boom, we just started to make it happen. And we've just been stumbling our way through, and having fun though, because, when there's such a wide gap for opportunity like there is in North Idaho for progressive voice, it just feels really great to get that started and, to inspire other people. And we've had a lot of feedback for people just being so thankful that there's someone saying the things we're talking about. So
there are other progressives in Idaho. It's not just.
Oh my God, you'd be surprised. So in the primary last cycle, Bernie actually swept Idaho 78.4. I always get the number wrong, but he swept like in a 70-30 split with Hillary in Idaho, which is amazing. And then there's all this energy for Bernie in Idaho. Then it kind of went away as people got really downtrodden and didn't know what to do. It's like, okay, yes, we want to make change, but making the change here is so incredibly hard with the super majorities. It's just mind-boggling.
So do you get the sense that there will be some changes in 2018? I know it's too much to expect that there'll be some sort of enormous blue wave and the Democrats will win everything. There's a lot of state house and state senate seats where there aren't even any Democrats running, so that's not even possible. But do you think that there will be at least the beginnings of change?
Possibly. We do have a really strong candidate in Kootenai County District 4, so we have a good chance of taking back a House seat here, I believe. But like I spoke about how that 10 years of losing had really gotten the party on its, heels locally, it's going to be a long slog. And the reality is when you look at the data in North Idaho, and this is just rough, so don't quote me exactly on these numbers, but there's something like 30-ish plus % registered Republicans, 35 to 38%. And then there's only 13% registered Democrats. And then there's 23% independents, those non-affiliated voters. So there's almost double non-affiliated voters in Kootenai County locally than there are even Democrats. But if you add the Democrats and the non-affiliateds, we can actually beat the Republicans.
There should be a strategy where Democrats would register as Republicans because they could not elect a Democrat. They would all register as Republicans to try and elect the sanest Republican because there was no chance of a Democrat even winning.
Yeah, it was pretty bad, and we've tried to put that to rest, and we've written about it.
It's a failed
People have been talking about it. It's totally a failed strategy, and the key though is that when we realized in the Bernie caucus, the caucus, but it went so clearly for Bernie that there is obviously a hunger for a progressive message in North Idaho and in Idaho in general, that we have to reach out to those unaffiliated and those independent voters. Those are the ones that came out and made such an impact on our caucus. And so the last year we've been trying to figure that out locally. How do we, settle into a more progressive message? And it's been really difficult. Even with candidates coming up that are also running in Kootenai County, they have had a hard time. Now, Rebecca Schroeder has definitely had a very progressive message from day one. She speaks about the issues progressives want to hear about, but some of the other candidates have been shy about it and, kind of tiptoeing around the edges. And I don't think they really understand that if you want that same amount of energy, that 78% of people to come out, you have to say what people need to hear. And what I keep preaching is that, listen, when we're in a supermajority like we are, you're not going to get to change anything, even if you get elected. We need leaders in conversation. We need people to fight for the conversation that we want to have, right? To draw a line in the sand and say, no more. This is enough. We're not going backwards anymore. We're going forwards. But what people end up doing is they play it safe because they want to go after the things they actually think they can do, like education, infrastructure, roads and stuff like this. But that doesn't get the unaffiliated voter out. They don't care. It's the same old same old stuff. And so we are still very much stuck in this space that we see the data that people want a progressive message, but politicians locally are still very wary to run on a truly progressive message because it's still pretty conservative.
What are some of those progressive issues that people really care about in your part of Idaho?
Healthcare.
Education.
Education.
As far as
Public
policies
land.
go, yeah, it's kind of hard to be progressive out here, but there are the things that progressive does well. The message is it talks about healthcare, talks about education, talks about access to all the things that people need, and like living wage is a huge one out here. Like Teuvo knows the stats better than I do about minimum wage workers in Idaho, but people here make the federal minimum wage to $7.25, and the living wage in Idaho 2 years ago was $14.73, and so we are super far behind. I know Teuvo can talk more about that.
Yeah, well, we're the number one in the country for minimum wage per capita percentage-wise, so we hold that. That's ours. We get to own that. We're number one.
Number one.
Yeah, number one. And we're also like 48th, 47th in education spending. We don't fund our schools. 25% of our budgets for teachers come from levies. So we literally would have to fire 25% of our teachers every 2 years if we didn't pass, property tax bonds and levies. But our, Butch Otter, our governor, just signed a $100 million tax break. And so there you have it. So it's total chaos out here. They're trying to make us like Oklahoma or Kansas, who are, states that have implemented, right-wing Republican tax break, fire teacher
which are failed experiments on a grand scale.
Yeah, which we're watching fall apart at this very moment. And Idaho is totally going down that path, and it's a real shit show.
There is hope for Idaho, though. And, we are seeing a mobilization of people slowly kind of getting them back from the Bernie wave, and people invested in candidates that actually matter, like Rebecca and Paulette, who are progressive women running in Idaho for governor and for District 4 here. I think we're Teuvo and I have been doing a lot of hard work to help the party here locally, and even on the IDP, the Idaho Democratic Party, there's a lot of work to be done because they still have the old mentality that lost the National Democratic Party 1,000+ seats. And the old approach is failed. It's a failed experiment, and people are still somehow kind of leery of progressive values and ideas. It's okay, guys, what you did not work. Let's do something new. Let's just try it. But I think there is more energy now, and we're gonna make some changes.
We here in Coeur d'Alene, at least, and the reason I think we are so. I mean, me personally, I grew up here. Alex moved here about a year ago, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so me, we represent two different angles. I'm been here my whole life, grew up on 19th Street, and Alex is coming here, and there's so many people moving here that I like that our podcast kind of represents that, both those sides of the fence. But, one thing I can say about Coeur d'Alene is that Coeur d'Alene proper, right, District 4, we have a very amazing community here. We have a strong arts community. We have a very giving community. Our city council is superb right now. We have an amazing city council. And, when I've been paying attention to all the different ways that we can try to help change things in this country and where I want to put my energy, I definitely realize that locally is where so much power lies, with developing, with paying the teachers, with all these different things. The city council has an extreme amount of power. And I say that to everyone listening. Your local government has more power than you can imagine. And so I've been watching the city council and participating there as much as I can, because we have an amazing local city council government here. So that's one definite ray of hope that I hang on to, is though even though Idaho is so backwards in its politics, locally here in North Idaho and Coeur d'Alene, and in Sandpoint especially, it's even more progressive than us. We have a vibrant progressive community.
Do you have an active Indivisible group?
I actually started the Indivisible group here. That was
You guys are doing everything.
got it down here, and no one's doing it. So, but yeah, Teuvo started it here,
and it basically slingshotted me into the conversation here locally because we were so fast and so quick. I kind of became the face of it, and we were protesting at our senator's offices here, and we were in the paper every day for months, and we got the local Republican Party in a freaking tizzy, and I mean, the last year has been pretty intense. I mean, I got contacted by Vice about them coming out to look at us. I got contacted by the biggest news organization in the Netherlands. They had heard about us. And partially, none of them ever came, but I even got an email from the Washington Post. They wanted to talk to us. And that is because basically Raul Labrador is our congressman. And when in